And this morning we have Peter Torraca here talking about orienting gem rougher colors. And despite what you may have heard, he is a great guy. He's sharing his time and knowledge with us, and that we greatly appreciate it. So, Peter, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. They asked me to talk about color, and that's what I do all the time. I'm a custom gemstone cutter. I work mainly for the trade. Some of the people in the back, particularly the gentleman way back, I learned from as I figured all this out. So it's giving back is kind of cool. I'll just get to it. So they say you're not supposed to start with an apology. So how about a confession? This is a blue zircon that I bought on one of my first trips to Tucson far many years ago. And I thought I'd be clever, so I buy the blue zircon and say, no, I'm going to fix this thing. I'm going to turn it into a nice custom cut face-up something or other. Go through the process, and I get a wonderfully pale zoned stone. Right. And this is when I learned that phrase I heard all along in the trade, the color is king. The faceting is always secondary to the color. We'll explain what I did wrong here at another time. But I took this lumpy, pretty typical high, actually they have low crowns, deep belly, wonky looking blue zircon, good color, and killed it. Because basically they destroyed the color zones. Everything else I'm going to tell you is kind of how to work with this stuff. The point is, color is king. That's what our goal is, to get the best color we can out of this thing. Talking about controlling color. Now, what I'm going to share is not specific formulas for success. These are techniques and things you can use to apply to wherever you want to achieve. Okay, I'm focused mainly on commercial cutting, that is for the trade. So my goals might be different than yours if you wish to be a little more creative. Take what you can from it. There's not really hard and fast rules. And right in the back of that, I have to tell you about a couple of hard and fast rules. There are two types of color in colored gemstones. We've got pleochroism. It's either dichroism or trichroism. I'll define those in a second. Pleochroism is just the overarching term. And our color zones. Pleochroism, and I should back up half a second in case there's any real gemologists here. I'm going to be talking a little bit loose with these terms. This is all from a cutter's perspective. So I'm oversimplifying, and if you're into the technical gemology, apologies in advance. This is how we're worried about it. A color zone, in readings, so get it straight, is a fixed area of different color within a crystal. So in this tourmaline, you got green and pink. No matter how you turn that stone, green's going to be on one side, pink's going to be on the other. They're fixed within the crystal. On the left, we have a tanzanite. This is a strongly trichroic stone, though usually you can only see two colors rather than three. Face on, you got the, kind of bluish purple. From the side, you get that greenish color. That's one of the ways we know this is untreated, by the way. When they heat them, it drives off the green. So most of your really nice, what we call nice color, the deep purple, purple blues, you won't find any green in those at all because they've heated it away. That's how it works. Usually that third color is hard to see. That's why I grabbed this one from Roger. In pleochroism, the color is always dependent on the angle you're looking at the stone, at the angle of the crystal, because we're looking at different optic axes. So in a dichroic stone, you have two optic axes. I'll show you a picture in just a second of that. Trichroic, you have three optic axes. That's just how we make it. The catch-all phrase is pleochroism. These are the two things you're going to deal with. Let's do dichroism first. Scapulite, also strongly dichroic. When we talk about these for convenience, we simplify crystallological terms. Your A axis is on the left here, is that long part of the stone. The C axis is the narrow part. This is just so we're all on the same page. In scapulite, if you want any color at all, you got to cut with your table on that C axis. If you cut it on the A, you're going to get a straw-colored stone with a little bit of golden flash. You cut it on the C, you'll have rich golden color. You'll have a beautiful stone, what you got. And that's generally true. For dichroic stones, you want to cut on the C. It's just the way nature gives them to us. In reality, if you like the other color better, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. Scott Blake. Right, we got it. Now here's an example. Dichroism and fine aquamarine. If you've only cut lighter colors of aquamarine, the dichroism doesn't come into play because the two axes are very close in color. So you can just kind of orient for whatever your best yield is, and you're happy. On the higher end material, go back one, I double click. On the higher end material, watch what happens. So you've got that pale there. See that axis strengthened? A little clearer on my screen than this. And this rough is that narrow side has a really intense color. You're talking significant price difference between that pale axis and the strong one. This material is about 120 bucks a gram out of Nigeria. You can figure out the carats. It ain't cheap, so you want to get the color right. Point being, you have a dichroic stone, you need to identify it. Choose your best color, and that's where you work the table. This is andalusite. Anybody have experience with this? It's a strongly trichroic stone. Yeah, you guys do, because you bought it at the same time I bought this piece. Strongly trichroic stone, typically out of Brazil. You get 3 colors face up if you do it right. And it's so strongly trichroic, you get all 3 of them face up. It's really cool stuff. It's kind of an orange or brown and green, orange and yellow and green, orange red, or red, yellow, green. It just depends on how the crystal forms. Very cool looking stuff. I had an included piece, so I cut it in this kind of cube, just to visualize what trichroism is and does. This crystal turned out to be more complicated. You see 2 colors here. You actually have one crystal is growing next to another. I'm told by the gemologist this is not twinning. If you want to know more, you have to ask them. I got lost at that point in the conversation. So this is trichroism, the best example I could find.
Wow.
And as you rotate it, you see that green? See that green flash for a second? There it is. You have to be in exactly the right optic axis to see it. So for stones like this, they're really not that, they're gemologically complex. For our purposes as cutters, you find the best color you want, and you put that face up. I'll tell you right now, nature doesn't always give you a choice, because if you have a thin crystal, but you do the best you can.
So if you wanted to capture all 3 colors like you were talking about, how would you orient it in that case?
In that case, I would decide which color I want dominant. I'm going to elaborate on that in a second.
Okay.
Which color we want dominant face up. But the cool thing about andalusite is it's so strongly trichroic, you're always going to get them. Tanzanite's not quite the same. But this stuff it's kind of unique in the gem world. So, bit of a commercial break. This became a commercial break. As I was preparing for this, I was talking to, if any of you here the other day for Aria's talk, they're familiar with this software. But I was talking to Reg, the designer of the Gem Cut Studio, and said, hey, is there any software out there that models this dichroism and color zones? So I was trying to make images and figure out stones I could share with you guys. He goes, well, as a matter of fact, turns out the new version, he gave me permission to share this to you, this is news actually. The new version of the software that he's working on can now account for dichroism, trichroism, random color zones. I don't know how it works, I haven't seen the software, but he kindly made some models for me. This is big thank you to him. And when this stuff comes out, guys, if you do any repairs or recutting, this is big deal stuff. Because you can place that color zone, kind of mimic your stone you have in your hand, and get a good idea of what's going to happen. I'll show you an example of how I have to do it now. So this is an imaginary stone. This is just proof of concept. This color combination doesn't exist in nature. It's a trichroic stone. And so we've got a strong blue, a strong green, and a strong red. And you can see, what do we have face up? Okay, you've got, this isn't going to let me stop it. I can't find my cursor on this. Sorry, I'm on my cursor's lost.
You have a blue-gray facing up.
Yeah, and you get to see the purple on the side, see the influence of the greens on the top? You see how, because it's blue face up, you get the blue dominant, and the other colors are influencing it. All right, so if you wanted to isolate two of those colors, well, good luck, but you'd have to change your design accordingly. This is why it's real important to say what kind of stone I got. If it's dichroic or trichroic, you got to plan your cut accordingly. And here's the other part of this. Back up to dichroism for a minute because it's simpler, and it's also much more common. There aren't a lot of trichroic stones we work with. Tourmaline, however, is one we probably everybody's cut and will work with at some point. Tourmaline is dichroic. You're looking on the C-axis of the crystal here, and as you can see, it's a wonderful muddy green. Your A-axis is actually that's actually an okay blue. It would be a nice steely blue. Well, I had this stone years ago when I was kind of figuring this stuff out, long before the software and things. And I said, okay, how bad? And the cutters that gave me advice said, no, you always cut on the nice color and you minimize that other one. We'll talk about how to do that in a minute. I want to know how bad is it? If I cut on that ugly axis, just how bad is it? This stone was a freebie. It wasn't very big at all. So, okay, so what happens? So you saw A, you saw C. This is A axis, just so you can see the two. You know, so I'm starting to tilt the stone and see them together. And there you go.
Oh.
So this is cut down the ugly axis of this muddy tourmaline. And this is actually fascinating. I'll give you the next one. But I also took this 15 some odd years ago before I got better at photography. So the black is all head shadow. I got there. Angled so you can see things a little better. Well, what do we have? Do you remember that muddy green? Okay. See how it went brown? And that nice blue green, you ended up with that yellow. We blended the colors with this type of design. I'll talk more about the particular designs in a bit, but for now, this is an illustration of why we need to control those colors. That was one surprise on this stone. The other surprise, it sold within about a day and a half of posting it online. Somebody out there loves muddy tourmaline. If you guys can isolate them, you can make money because this stuff's easy to buy. I'm shocked. In fact, and that is sold, and then I had requests, oh, can you make more? I'm like, I couldn't. I only had one stone. Hold on. Here's the right way of handling tourmaline. This is high-end indicolite out of Afghanistan. This is the good stuff, as they call it. The problem with the good stuff, lower right, you have a closed C-axis. Okay, closed. You're not even muddy color, it's black. You've got this fantastic face up. Now this material, you know, you're talking hundreds of dollars a gram, translates into $500, $600, $700 a carat, depending how when you sell it. This is not joke material. So we want none of that black messing with the blue. In person, this has got, see that electric blue flash across the middle? That's what you get on movement. It's a hot looking stone. So to control that ugly axis, what we need to do, top right picture, the reason I gave you all three of these, you see those end pavilion angles really steep? To control a dark axis on a tourmaline, you need to be cutting those end facets 68 to 70 degrees. That's the magic number. Okay? If you start 68 to 70 degrees on the ends. Now, in reality, you can go right up to 90, and you really can push it down to about 58 before you start getting serious influence up front. But what you'll find is the closer you get below 65, I like 68, but below 65, those ends will get darker. You push it far enough in, you'll get black ends, because you'll get nothing but C facing up. The other direction, you start heading towards 90, you will gain no color face, none of the bad color face up, and more weight, but you will tick off every bench jeweler who touches the stone, because now it's really hard to set with those ends. So from my experience, I found that 68 to 70 degrees is a happy balance between, as you can see, I mean, there's almost no black on the ends, keeping the material, and not taking off the bench jewelers who I have to work with, because I like to buy my stones. Okay, so color zoning. These are both tourmalines, so you know they're both dichroic. The stone on the top, you just saw a cut, all right? The one on the bottom, it is dichroic, but our primary concern is that color zone. Okay, so no matter how you turn the stone, those color zones are fixed in place. They're not going to go anywhere. If you look at the sea of that particular one, it's an apricot color. You can't tell without dividing the stone if it changes for the color zones, but we don't care, so we're not cutting that up that way. So we need to approach this one a little differently. We're looking primarily to keep those color zones faced up. At the moment, just talking about identifying a color zone. This is a large Montana sapphire. This was about, I think this was 4 or 5 grams that I was commissioned to cut. A really strange stone. This is untreated. It's got that weird pink color zone in it. It's a buttery colored stone. I cut it, loved it, disappeared in somebody's collection. I have to wait, note it somewhere. For the moment, the color zone's the key. Is that pink ups the value of that stone. You've got to be careful. This is amethyst. If you've been cutting more than 5 or 6 stones, you probably cut some of this quartz. This looks like nice consistent color up front, but you put a little backlight on it. See that strong color zone on one side? If you preform this in such a way that you cut away that color zone, or you don't orient it for your design, you're going to get a paler stone. You want that rich color. It's going to make me quick through. That looks like this. You have to keep that color zone and place it properly in your design. We'll talk about that in a moment. Right now, it's about identifying the color zone. Find out where it is and be aware it can be very subtle. And here's a case study on subtle. This is a 9.25 carat Ceylon sapphire. This was an estate stone, an inheritance stone that somebody had got from grandma or whatever the story was. They commissioned me to recut it. Typical commercial fashion, I want it best color, best shape, no weight loss. Okay, sure, no problem. Pick 2. So, we had a discussion about the realities of cutting, and then, she decided they want performance and color was their main concern. Because here's what the bottom of the stone looked like.
Oh.
Holy crap. Yeah, that's basically what it was. The bench jewelers were not happy, but this is a family stone, and it is a high value stone. That first picture I showed you, I deliberately overlit it so you could see the color zones. I was trying to figure out, okay, before I touch this, where are those color zones? These Ceylon sapphires are all color zoned, no matter which one you get. If it doesn't have color zoning, it's been treated, probably with beryllium, give it back. Okay, this is the natural stuff. Now, slight rabbit trail here. That slope made every one of you cringe. Be very careful. That may not be crappy cutting. Okay, that might be a master cutter who's exploiting the color zone. Those guys are so good, they can put a little slope on that, which forces the color on one side to look stronger face up. All right? It could also be they're just shooting for weight and they don't care. It's up to us to figure out which one it is. Well, in this case, me, because I'm on the dock here. So you got to figure out where the color zones are, decide is that just crummy cutting, or are they doing something I need to know about before I change anything? Happily, in this case, it was crummy cutting. Here's the side view. This is a monster chunk of a stone. So we're going to lose a bunch of weight. How do you lose the minimum weight and make a good face up? I still don't know where the color zones are. By the way, look at this. Where does it look like all the color is right now? Yeah, up the top. It isn't. It actually slopes from this perspective, right to left. This left side, that chunky wedgy bit on the crown, has a good bit of color in it. Okay, if you only use this perspective, I'll just cut it down, get rid of that crown, flatten it out, you'd probably lose 50% of color. But that would be a bad day. Or somebody else's stone. So here's what you do, or what I did anyway. A little immersion. All this is, guys, if you've done any gemology, they give you the chemicals you need, forget the proper chemical name, the chemical you need to put it, immerse it, get rid of the maximum refractive index, you can get the microscope on it. This is just mineral oil. That's all it is. It works great. You can wash it off with a little soapy, dish soapy water. You wash it off with a little alcohol or spirits. It's fantastic. It doesn't match the RI, but it's just enough to get rid of the reflections so we can see the color zones. Remember that crown looked colorless? You see that density of color at the top of this picture? If you cut into that, you're losing a ton of color from the stone. But, see where the light side of that thing is down at the bottom? That's what we can play with. So we can gain a little bit we can make it a little bit shorter, rearrange the pavilion facets, and make it pop. So with that bits of information, I was able to proceed on it. Here's where we ended up. Yes, it is asymmetric. If you guys were a bunch of jewelers, I'd never point it out because they wouldn't care. There's a reason it's asymmetric. This kind of cutting, it's a little inside trade stuff for you here. This kind of cutting, they're primarily concerned about weight. They'll tell you they want color performance, they care about weight. So I kind of match it as best I can, make it so that it's going to look fantastic face up, better than the original. You put this in the mounting, it looks symmetric and perfectly fine. I cleared out the customer. If they say, no, I want that to be precision cut, now we have a different story. That's what we do. This case, performance, color, just make it pretty. I did. And here is more of the real life color. This material, you're probably looking at the, I don't know what, 2,000, 2,500 a carat wholesale price range. And so this ended up being like a 5.6. You can figure out from there. Identify your color zones. But actually, it's funny in the old sense. I think of, maybe you don't, I thought of the pleochroism as the more complicated thing when I first got into this, because color zones just kind of sit there. It turns out the color zones are more complicated. Pleochroism, either die or try, you just find where it is and put the face up, that's what you want, maybe minimized. This stuff, because the way the light bounces and the density is more on one side or another, this takes the thought. So, designs. Because we're not just talking about all designs behave equally. You all know faceting's about light control. So what designs we choose directly affect how those color zones or pleochroism work. I gave this some thought, and I realized that we can put all designs on kind of this spectrum, kind of this line. On the one end, you've got brilliant designs, and guys, I'm only thinking about pavilions here for the moment. Keep it simple. Where pavilions, you got that cone shape comes to a point. On the other side of the spectrum, you got steps. You've got a keel line, things are spread out. Everything else, I just grabbed two examples, fall in the middle. We've got radiants, they've got more of a keel, but you're heading towards that point. And your baryon, which is specifically designed to be an adaptation of the brilliant to another shape. Okay, so everything fits in here. Here's why it's important. The colors aren't a great choice for this particular screen, but it's got red and green kind of arrow dots, whatever you want to call them. Your brilliants are going to blend the colors together. We'll take those two, your color zone, your pleochroism, and bring them together, mix them in the middle. Your steps on the other extreme only blend on the ends, because that's where you've got, if you think about it, your very ends of even a step cut kind of start heading towards a trillion. They kind of come down, a brilliant. They kind of come down to a point. That's why if you have a uniform color stone, you cut an amethyst in step cut, you get a lighter color in the middle, and towards the end you get a darker look because of this effect. This is just something to help you think about how to approach it when you're choosing designs. Give you some examples. We've already talked about this, but this is on the brilliant end. Remember, it mixed those two axes. It's blending that stuff together. The cone is doing that for us. This sunstone. This is a little bit in between a baryon and a radiant, but it'll give you the idea. It's got a large color zone in it. You've got some blending going on, but you see how it doesn't have the mix you saw in that muddy one? You have a little bit more spread of color, a little more consistent across. This is a radiant. This is a tourmaline. Oh, sorry, my picture is so much prettier. You have like an apricot color on the one axis. The other axis is kind of a pinkish red. I'll show you on the screen later if you want to know. I love this stone. What I deliberately did is I used kind of this radiant So I deliberately mix kind of the colors. So you've got this wonderful party color up front. I want that C-axis blending in because it was an attractive color. And then we're moving towards the good old straight step cut. That tricolor stone at the beginning, I don't want to blend those colors. I want you to see face up, thick, green, in this case that colorless in the middle. Well, if I brought those ends in, apricot's not a bad color, you'd lose some of the pink, you'd lose some of the green. You wouldn't affect the white at all. All right? These are what you have, these are your tools. This is what you got to work with. Now, pointy ends are a bit of a different thing. This is an unusual Malaya garnet. Back before this color garnet became a big thing, I stumbled on one in East Africa. I cut the thing, and I was novice enough to be surprised by the color of the point. In thinking about it now, those points act like a brilliant pavilion. They take and concentrate color. Okay? So that body color you see where the brilliant center is pushing light out, this one thing, the point is concentrating. This was another quick sale. I kind of wish they still had this on. Because at this time, $200-300, I was happy. Now this material is crazy. Go try to buy the rough. But, oh well. Good learn. Pointy ends. This is a Marilani garnet. I deliberately use the step cut. It will save weight to do that rather than the brilliant style. But I also wanted pointy ends. Because mint garnet, it's a brush in the series, tends to be very bright face up if you use a brilliant. The problem with bright is you wipe out some color. So I combine steps, save a little weight, concentrate the color on the ends. The overall effect is I keep some richness in that stone. All right, I control that color, keep it going. And opposite example, spinel. See what pointy ends did to me here? We have decent color face up in the middle, but because I chose a hard square, every one of those ends concentrated that color. So this became an overall darkish stone. It's small enough I didn't mess with recutting it, but if I had chosen more of a square cushion, which moves towards what? The brilliant end of things. You end up with more bright light coming up. You don't have that concentration of color. I would have gotten a better color stone out of it. Okay? That's why I'm trying to give you these tools to work with. One other cool example of this in this vein, at least I think it's cool. Here's a sunstone. This is kind of putting it all together. All right? This stone came to me as it was already kind of like a parallel long drop. We have a color zone on the one end, and it was pretty much your classic straw Oregon sunstone for the rest. So what you do, what I did, if you ignore the bottom 3/4 of that stone, what do you have at the top? You got a brilliant, right? And that's what I did. Those points come right down, right until you get the step cut. What's that going to do for us? Two things. Concentrates that color, all right? It does some blending. You got that straw, but it keeps that strong color. Then I have step because I want to maintain that wonderful transition from rich color through the pale. I deliberately wanted that, so I want to capture it. It looks cool. And what's the pointy end doing for us? It's concentrating color. And as a bonus, it's reflecting that brilliant color, because that brilliant pavilion is the biggest part of that stone, and then it tapers kind of like wedge-shaped if you look from the side. So you're concentrating, and you get this really cool effect. There's no color in that point. If you were to cut it off and look at it, it's just straw. That's all reflection.
So that's looking straight down on the table?
Straight down the table. Well, angled a little bit so you don't see my head shadow. But yeah, that's the idea. As a little side note for you, footnote, you see what it's done to my inclusions at the top? There's only 2 or 3 inclusions there. All right. By the nature of step cuts, it's harder to hide inclusions because they tend to reflect better. All right. If you put enough facets in it, you can hide inclusion to a certain degree. It's not 100%, but you obscure them to the eye better. It was just one of the trade-offs for this stone. I thought it was okay. Yeah, I've got plenty more to roll with, so like Kel did, if there's any questions, just jump in.
I have a question.
I'm gonna keep rolling, yeah.
So a tourmaline, I have big, and it's pink, but the C-axis is beautiful dark pink. So a steep That's deep step will bring out the color of the C-axis.
Okay, so you've got a large tourmaline where the A-axis is one color pink.
Bubble
which are
color.
like- oh, bubble. Oh, so it's a hot pink. Excellent. And the other side, the darker pink on your C.
Hot, yeah.
Okay, and you want to keep both of them.
I'd rather get the hot pink, but I can't cut. If I cut the C-axis, it's
Then
small
what you
stone.
need to do is move towards that. I'm fighting with the software for a second here. See if I get back to the. Nope, it was over here. It's in this slide piece. Because we were talking about design, should be in this set. There, this one. This is how I would approach that stone. If the most of your material, like you have a longer piece, is that lighter pink, it's attractive, but you have two choices here. It's attractive, but it's okay. Use this sort of gradient thing going on. Instead of using the super steep angles on the end, I deliberately brought them in to force that side color up. Okay, if you have a longer crystal, in this case, that lighter pink will only be on the ends. But that's your best option. Your only other option is to divide this one and cut on the nicer axis. It's tourmaline. You're not going to have a whole bunch of choices.
Okay, so radiant.
Yeah, radiant with deliberately stay within the critical angle of the stone. Don't get too shallow or wash it out. But yeah, bring those sides in as much as you can. I could probably even share some design idea with you on that later. I can have to show you the software and stuff. But yeah, that's what I would do anyhow. Okay, we're about to jump into this. Anything else before we get into deeper water?
Peter, I do have a blocky piece of sunstone rough. I don't know if you can see that, but it's got.
So it's a large rectangle with a vivid orange in the center.
Yeah, and then it's green surrounding it a little bit.
Hang on to that. I have
Okay.
a very specific example. Fabian shared exactly that with me. So
Great.
it's coming.
All right,
Okay.
cool.
This is a fantastic text. Even what are we at? 50 years later, or whatever it is now. It's bits of it are terribly outdated. Some of the preface information, the reference information in the back is fantastic. I actually still use it a lot, particularly that reference information and the transposition charts, where you can tell which index gear matches to which other index gear, which helps hugely for repairs, and you can end up doing it. But here's why I bring it up. This diagram. Put the zone in the cone. This is the standard device to new facetors. You have a small color zone in the large stone. You put that in the cone of your brilliant, and you will face up whatever that other color is. Well, I'm probably an overthinker, but I ruined several stones following this advice. And I couldn't figure it out because I've seen people use it to great effect. Exactly doing this. You put the color in the zone, and it looks good. So, right, I had to figure it out. Here's what I did. I happen to have this large CZ. This is not my work. I bought it before I started faceting. It's just a cool, sparkly thing I had. So it's like 31 millimeters, big stone. And you got a Portuguese, which is basically a brilliant pavilion with an SRB crown. So this is a great example for what Vargas is talking about. And what I did is I grabbed a red Sharpie, and I put a little color zone on the bottom. And just to keep this kind of quantified a bit, I put it takes up about 10% of the distance from that tulip point to the girdle edge. Okay, so if you just outline it, it's about 10%, just to give us a mark. And as you can see, face up, you got a red dot. That's how most of my things ended up looking. Not so impressive unless you want some creative effect. That's how you do needle cuts. If you happen to have that perfect piece of tourmaline in your round brilliant, those look fantastic. But here's how they look fantastic. Ahead of myself. It turns out 15 to 20% doesn't look a whole lot different, so I skipped those. 30% of that distance, and we start getting, see how it's starting to show up in the crown? We're starting to get color happening. That's not an attractive stone, but you've gone from colorless to some color, so we're making progress here. At 50%, hey, that's not bad. On the right, you see how you get a little bit of colorless happening there? So this is a saleable stone, but it's not an oh wow stone at this point. Still, we're ahead of colorless. We've used our color zone. It turns out 60% is a magic number. You see how much? Once again, guys, it's easier on the screen if you can't quite see it on the projector. But it's about 60% of the way up, and you get a full up red stone out of it. With, if you tilt it kind of like normal as you would on your hand, normal, it looks pretty good. It's not till you get pretty far over you can see the colorless. And that matches with sapphires that we prepared out of Sri Lanka. We'll take, and the top half will be colorless and the bottom half will be colored. It is roughly 50% on the pairs that they use. So there's your mark. And you compare it to Vargas's thing. You see where I went wrong? The top of his little dot color zone, yeah, it's getting close to what I was doing, but I needed fuller color. Yes, sir.
So what if you just have a thin layer of color, like if you'd taken the red off of the bottom and left a ring around? Okay.
Yeah, kind of like this.
Excellent.
We're thinking along the same lines, man. That's exactly what I thought next. Say, okay, so 60% is about the mark, but what happens if I've got that slanty sort of, I've just got to wait for a color here, what do? So I just erased, sorry, once again, hard to see on the screen, I erased, in this case, top half of that 60%, just left the other. And you still get a pretty decent face-up stone. See how you got that colorless on the right? That's reflecting from the uncolored part. Once again, we're not talking premium high-end, but it's not colorless. You know, you saved quite a bit. I went a half a step further. I said, well, okay, because if you really look at these, they're never half split in the cooler. They're always just over the cooler a little bit if you have a minimal zone. And here's why. Watch what happens. Okay, all I did is at the top, I just added that little 10% bitter red. Look at how much color we picked up. Okay, you see how that colorless went from wide, it shrunk right down. So if you can get past that, every little bit, you can get past that 10%, you get more color face up. This was a surprise to me. I didn't realize how little you had to go over that cooler to make this work. As long as you have part of it up in that roughly 60% range. Now, I should give you a disclaimer here. I found 60% with this experiment. That table is roughly 58 to 60%. It could, I didn't take this next step out, so I'm just, disclaimer. It could be that 60% cone depends how big your table is. So I know that happens with diamonds. You get fish eyes at the table and cone angles don't match. It's a head shadow problem, but it's very similar to the color thing. So take this as a general idea, not as a hard fast thing. You might have to experiment with it. But I think if you hit that 60%, it'll be pretty good. Yes, sir. Right in the back.
So, you know, it's interesting that you're coloring the outside of the stone. So effectively the same, you know, because the stone, it's colored inside. The same difference?
Half a second on that, because this is where Reg helped me out a lot. That's the next slide.
I just want to ask you, could you correct for the colorless area just by setting the stone in a certain way, so you wouldn't get that? It's still you still
No, not in the way we cut. If you're cutting, you know, paying attention to critical angles and using the proper angles in your stone, you should be able to set it in a gypsy set, you know, completely enclosed and not change the performance of the stone at all. That's part of what North American cutting is. In the trade, when they had those crummy cut ones that are somewhat windowed, yeah, you can mount that in like a completely enclosed setting and intensify the color because you're adding dark to it.
Yeah.
It depending what style cut you're using, but for us, typically no. Your question was spot on, and I thought the same thing. But since I can't inject color into a CZ, is that a loss? Turns out my buddy Reg is exactly that. He reproduced part of this for me. I did that CZ experiment before I found out about the software. And proof of concept, this one on the left, he did exactly that. He put the color zone, I think he just chose random at 30%. And you see how that matches what I showed you pretty closely. It's not perfect, so that color is actually in the stone. So I think my experiment's pretty valid. I wouldn't like die on this hill, but it's a good, helps me out. Here's the one I had that I couldn't model. What if you took that same color zone, put it on the crown? Okay, what if I could fill the crown with color rather than the pavilion? I'm thinking it should be pretty good face up. Well, this is where his other one comes in. No color zone on the bottom. All the reflection you see is from the crown. If any of you have know what a garnet glass doublet is, where they put that garnet just in the, it's an old assembled gemstone. They used to take red almandine and glue it onto a piece of green glass. So you have a hard top and a colorless bottom, or green bottom. It was a way to modify the color and keep a hard top. It's 1940s, 50s trickery stuff. But that's all the color in here. It's just that top layer, just like if you had one of those doublets. The rest of it's colorless. But look at this. I apologize, I can't stop them with the way things are set up. There's almost no color. But I've been chewing on this, and actually we talked about it at dinner tonight when I gave them a preview of this stuff. Do you have any theories what's happening there? Why, if you put that same color zone that gives a nice reddish pink on the left, if you put it in the crown, why does it go pale? It dawned on me that I'd already answered my own question. What does a brilliant cone do? Blends and concentrates. So, and this is, I had to modify it a little bit if I thought of this. You're taking colorless and pink and blending them in that cone. And it turns out, whichever color's in the cone dominates. Remember our tricolor model, that fake stone with the 3 colors that Reg did? What was the dominant color face up? It was blue, because that was the face up strongest color. The others were blended in. You take this, you put your color zone in the crown, it's going to blend colorless and that red, but with an emphasis on the colorless, because that's the dominant color in the crown, in the pavilion. You want a face up color in your color zone, it's got to be in the pavilion. You can't ignore the crown, but it's got to be in the pavilion. Here's an example, a real life example of this, and this is where Kel's question comes in. Fabian Nepp, he's a German, I believe. I think Fabian's in Germany. Really nice guy. He actually runs a commercial cutting, and he's got a business in selling to the trade. Oregon Sunstone, he had some of it. He posted a sample of something he did on Facebook. I said, hey, that matches my talk, and he gave me some more pictures to share with you. So we're going to step through this cutting of the stone on the lower left. On the computer in person, it's much redder. This is making it look kind of a dull. It's a nice face-up red, very much like yours. So what he did was he preformed it. What do we have? That green color zone is not just a rind. It's actually a cap over top of the red. And he just rough preformed it here, got the crud off, but you can see clearly where the color zone is. He's putting it, he's shooting for a brilliant type. He's putting that color in the zone, in the cone, just like we should be doing. Just in process, when he sent me a full picture. But you can see here which color's in that cone. You got that wonderful red arc. The green is on the outside. So just looking at this, what's he trying to emphasize?
The red.
Yeah, man, that's what I'd be doing. Green is nice, red sells better. Hold on, yeah, that's part of what. Hold on, you're right. This is just an in-between picture. Unfortunately, the guy uses glue. I can't recommend that to any of you.
Yes.
Anyway, here's the finished stone. So you actually have that green rind, a little bit of layer on top. I might have to modify that. I don't know if he cut through that layer or not. I couldn't tell. But you've got the cone, the red in the cone, so predominantly face up red with a green modifier. And you see how little green there is, okay? Because that's what he's doing. Using that cone, it's blending, but the dominant color is the red because that's what's in the depth of the cone. Yep.
And this was his goal, or like he's just doing an example?
This was a commercial stone he had cut. I think he personally cut this one. And in my development, I talked to him about it and got some of the backstory. He and I are in a similar vein because we're professional cutters for the trade. So the thinking's very much the same. What's new here for me anyways, I'm quantifying it for you. One of the reasons I'm grateful that they asked me to talk is that this is stuff I do, but I've never had to explain it. So that Thank you.
So, Peter, why are you saying that the green is a dome on top
Oh, because I could-
around the side?
I could tell from the way this rough was,
Okay.
in talking to him, that it was actually a cap layer. It's not. It was very fine. The green color zones in these, you either get pure green intense or you get little zones.
Yeah,
in
and
it.
it's usually only visible from.
What if you
certainly.
make the stone smaller, you know, less height and smaller stone? Would you get a better looking, brighter color? Because frankly, that looks pretty muddy to me.
Yeah, and you know what? If you saw it in here, I think it's a little bit better.
Yeah,
It is a mixed color stone.
you get more red, but
Right.
the goal is to get the red and green both
Yeah.
to show up in those. And I sat down with the owner of the Double Eagle for a while and talked cutting these this summer. And he swears the way to do it. And it looked like, if you back up to the photo before that you said was a transition photo, that one, what John said was make sure you leave some clear around the
Yes.
green. You know, if you try to cut it right up to the green, you'll really brown the stone.
Right.
But he said if you leave, like he's done there, a small ring of clear around it, then you'll get the reds and the greens to both show up.
And like, you're spot on. And I wasn't going to quite go into that simply because this talk can bloom into too much time. If you think about it, you have a brilliant, and the edges of it towards the girdle, they kind of wedge down. If you were to look at from the side, right? In a sense, that's a pointy corner effect. All right? It's round, we're just talking about keep it simple. Well, square cushion